Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to Daily's 2A News. Today we're going to talk about a new and another proposed ATF rule, regulation, and definition change that would absolutely devastate the Second Amendment. This is one of the worst that I have seen, so let's go ahead and talk about it. This channel is proud to be supported by the Firearms Policy Coalition. Make sure you check that link in the description box, become a member, and donate when you can, because these are the people that are going to be fighting back against stuff like this, the stuff that we're going to be talking about in today's video. Also, check out fightetf.org, where you can find a link to leave a comment about the ATF's proposed rule changes and do your part to protect our Second Amendment rights. Okay, buckle up. We got a big one here. There's a lot to talk about in the new proposed rule, definition, and regulation changes that the ATF is proposing. If you want, you guys can go into the description box and you can click a link on the proposal itself so you can read it, or just Google 2021R-05. The first link should be to the ATF's letter so you guys can read it for yourself there as well. But it is very broad. It's just about all encompassing, and it is completely unconstitutional. So let's go ahead and start from the top. One thing that the ATF wants to do with these new proposed rule changes is they want to change the definition of a frame or receiver. Now, when most of us think of a frame or receiver, we're thinking about the actual lower, right? The actual lower frame or receiver, right? That's what receives the magazine, the lower frame or receiver. What the ATF would like to do now is to make any of the external visible parts that are integral to the firearm itself a frame or receiver. Anything that houses any of the critical moving components of a firearm could be considered a frame or receiver. That means that the upper receiver, let's say on an AR, would have to have a serial number and would be considered a second firearm. That could mean that the handguard, that could mean that the bolt carrier group, that could mean that all of these different components that are visible from the outside could be considered a separate firearm, so that when you buy one firearm in itself, it could have multiple serial numbers, and each one of those could be considered a legal frame or receiver. So they're trying to expand what is considered a frame or receiver in order to make sure that even unfinished parts that you might be getting, for instance, you go to the store, you pick up an $80 upper, just a stripped upper, no forward assist, no dust cover on it, nothing. You just picked up that stripped upper. You would have to 4473 that. You would have to do your background check. They would have to keep files at the FFL. It would basically be a frame or receiver. So that, as you can see, that would cause a lot of problems, especially for people who are just hobbyists. Think about those complete uppers, right? Right now, you have to do a 4473 and a background check to buy the lower, because that's a serialized part, right? That's considered the frame or receiver. So you have to do your background check on that. Well, if this were to change, any of these components would require a 4473, you to pay a fee, background check, and all sorts of paperwork. That's just the beginning. Now, believe it or not, in the same proposed rules that are going after things that are clearly not frames or receivers, trying to classify them as frames or receivers, they're also going after dealers and gunsmiths. I want to read this to you. It is somewhat confusing, and that's why I'm reading it. But they're going after dealers and gunsmiths, and they're going to require licensing of these people, which is, again, it's going to be onerous. It's going to take time and money. It is absolutely ridiculous. So I'm going to read this directly from the ATF's letter here. Dealers/gunsmiths are not authorized to perform, repair, modify, embellish, refurbish, or install parts in or on firearms, frames, receivers, or otherwise for or on behalf of a licensed importer or licensed manufacturer, because those firearms are for sale or distribution. A license as a Type 07 manufacturer would be required. Okay, so the next thing that they're trying to do here is they're trying to go after 80s again, okay? So what they're trying to do is to create a rule, a regulation, or a classification of when an unfinished receiver should be considered a receiver. So for instance, if it comes with a part kit and they consider it to be readily convertible into a working firearm, then that parts kit combined with that frame would mean that the frame would need to be considered a firearm with a corresponding serial number imprinted on it, and a background check would be required before you actually even get it in its unworking state, before you even finish it up. So they're saying basically if it, it's a frame, let's say it's a pistol frame, and that comes with a parts kit, even though it's completely unfinished, doesn't work at all, wouldn't work if you put all the parts together without actually finishing it up, that's now going to be considered a finished frame. So again, it's just absolutely ridiculous. They're also trying to determine at what point, when you were to build something yourself, at what point would that be considered near finished? Okay, not finished, but what point would it be considered near finished? So then it would require a serial number and, for it to be considered an actual working firearm. Again, these are unfinished, okay? And they're trying to determine at what point unfinished is going to require a serial number. Now, there's so much going on with this proposed rulemaking that I really suggest that you do your due diligence and you just take 10 minutes out of your time, click on the link below and read it for yourself. Be an informed Second Amendment supporter so that if somebody brings this up or you want to make an argument against it when you leave your comment to the ATF, you know exactly what you're talking about. That's the best way to do things. But let me just go ahead and read a brief synopsis here. So what the ATF's proposed rule is trying to do, again, and we're going to go over some of this like we did before, provide new definitions of firearm frame or receiver and frame or receiver, amend the definition of firearm to clarify when a firearms parts kit is considered a firearm, and gunsmith to clarify the meaning of that term and to explain that gunsmiths may be licensed solely to mark firearms for unlicensed persons, provide definitions for complete weapon, complete muffler or silencer device, definition of PMF, privately made firearm, also to change the definition of readily. So is it readily convertible to something that can actually be used? They want to change the definition of readily. Okay, that's also in there. Provide a definition of importer or manufacturer serial number. Provide a deadline for marking firearms manufactured, clarifying marking requirements for firearms, mufflers, and silencers, amend the format for records retention, and amend the time period that records must be retained related to these licenses on the premises. The list just keeps going of different things that the ATF has proposed in this one single rule change, 2021 R-5. If this happens, you're going to see a major shift in our country. So the ATF is basically creating law. Okay, that's what they're doing here. They're creating law by simply changing rules, changing regulations, and changing definitions. If you change the definition of something, it falls under different categories of control by the government. And so they feel that they have a right to change the definition at any given time, making it either fall under the NFA or fall under a different regulation, or just by changing the term or the definition of what is a frame or receiver, you could see that that might change in which way it can be regulated. That's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to create law through bureaucracy. These are unelected officials that are trying to do things that they're not supposed to do. Laws are supposed to be created by Congress, but the ATF is trying to create new laws here that will create new criminals and just essentially devastate the Second Amendment. So we have until, I believe, August to leave our comments. Please go and do that. Again, make sure you check out fightatf.org, and there you'll find the link to leave your comment. The more comments, the better. They have to acknowledge those comments, and if they don't, it gives us a legal leg to stand on when we fight back against this. We know the ATF is going to ignore the comments. They always do. The comments, it's just a procedural thing that has to be there by law, so they put it there. And if we leave comments and they ignore them, it means that, hey, we can point the fact out that, look, this many people left comments and you simply ignored those comments, and this should not stand. So anyway, again, do your part to support the Second Amendment. I really do appreciate you guys watching the video. If you could, if you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. The like button is always appreciated. You guys have a great day.